Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little for PokerNews.com, and today we have a fun hand from a $1,500 buy-in World Series of Poker tournament against a relatively tight player. So the tight player min raises from under the gun +1, then it folds around to me in the big blind with 9-8 offsuit. So right off the bat you can go either way between calling or folding, but given there is an ante in play and we are getting amazing pot odds, folding is almost always a little bit too tight in this scenario. I mean, we have to put in 800 chips to win 4,200, so it's not hard to realize 20-ish% equity in this scenario. So we're going to call with the 9-8 offsuit and see a flop, and just realize this is not a great hand. We're going to play cautiously pretty much unless we flop a really good hand like 2-pair or better. And we're going to go from there. So that is exactly what happens this time. We have 9-8 on a 9-7-5 board. So we have top pair and a gut shot, which is pretty good. And in reality, our opponent should not connect very well with this board because the opponent should be raising a lot of big cards and big pairs. So our opponent's not going to have 8-6 suited so often, right? Or 9-7 suited or 7-5 suited. And he may not even have pocket fives if he's going to be folding those pre-flop. But I think you're going to find that most generally tight players play all pairs from all positions, even though that is usually not the ideal line. So we check, and our opponent now bets 1,200 into the 4,400 pot, which is a little bit odd. Usually on this very coordinated board, especially the middle card coordinated boards, your opponent should not be betting that often. So if your opponent is good, usually when they bet in this scenario, they're going to be betting a large size. And they're going to be betting here with their best made hands, like overpairs and sets, and then some draws. So what draws could the opponent have? Well, he could have Jack 10, right? He could also have a hand like Ace 8 or Ace 6 suited. But really, beyond that, there aren't a ton of obvious draws. So some less obvious draws would be Queen 10 suited, Queen Jack suited, King Queen suited, King Jack suited, with the backdoor flush draws. So those hands all make a lot of sense to bet as well. And then the opponent would check if they had something like Ace 9, you would think. Maybe they would check hands like Ace 7, Ace 5 suited. Maybe the opponent even checks aces and kings sometimes with the idea of just calling turn and river, no problem. And that's going to be a strategy that's pretty difficult to take advantage of. That said, when the opponent does bet small, if the opponent's trying to use a decently sound strategy, that's usually going to be with just their whole range. So if the opponent's betting small with their whole range here, because they have a little bit of a range advantage, then obviously I should not be folding much at all. And also we're getting amazing pot odds, right? So I have to put in 1,200 to win a pot that's going to be 6,800, so I need to realize like 18% equity or something like that. And again, it's hard to not realize 18% equity with top pair and a gut shot. So we do just check call. There may be actually a little bit of merit to raising the flop if we do think the opponent's betting all of their overcards, because all the overcards do have some equity. And then if we get called, well, yeah, that's unfortunate, and we're probably behind. The problem with raising in spots like that, where if you do get called and you're usually unhappy when you get called, is that yes, you do get some protection by raising, but you also kind of force your opponent to play well. I mean, I guess if I could raise to like 2,800, if that would result in the opponent playing straightforwardly, then that might be pretty sweet. Because then I'm risking not very much at all. I'm getting very clean information. You really don't want to raise big here. You'll see a lot of recreational players raise to 7,200 in the spot. And what happens then is when they get called, they're just dead. Well, not dead, but they're drawing pretty thin. So that's an option. I decided to call, though, because I really wasn't sure what the opponent was doing. So we just do call. Turns a 4 of clubs, which is pretty much a blank. Doesn't really help our opponent at all. We check, and the opponent again bets, though, 2,000. This is the problem when you're playing against players who you don't really know what they're doing. I mean, the opponent could just very easily be betting aces like this, thinking, I want to bet small because I want to make sure I get paid. Or the opponent could just be betting ace-king like this because he doesn't know what he's doing, or pocket twos like this for the same reason. So this is a pretty crappy spot at this point because now, again, we need to realize 20% equity, and we probably will with top pair no kicker, but we do very clearly have a bluff catcher, right? So on the flop, raising maybe had a bit of merit, but on the turn, I definitely do not think we should raise. Unless, of course, you think you can make your opponent fold out a hand like jacks, right? Some very tight players will fold if you raise to 5,000 on the turn and then jam the river, but I'm not in the business of trying to make people fold top pairs. That is almost always not going to go well for you. So we do decide to just call. River's another 4. I check, and now the opponent bets 2,100. So the opponent's gone, raise preflop, small bet, small bet, small bet. And if you knew with a high degree of certainty that your opponent's range was almost certainly like a 9 or better, well, then I should fold, right? Because I lose to all 9s and I lose to everything better. The problem, though, is we were playing in a $1,500 tournament against a somewhat random opponent. Blinds are 400, 800, so presumably I have been at this table for a long time, enough to label the opponent as very, very tight. But at the same time, I certainly don't have enough of a sample on my opponent's river strategies to know that this player's never going to be bluffing here, right? I think a lot of people are very quick to determine that their opponent is just never bluffing because they bet so small, and then they call and they're wrong, quote unquote wrong. They call and their opponent does have a better hand. And they're like, oh yeah, see, I should have folded. And you have to understand here, we don't have to be good very often at all. We have to put in 2 to win 15, right? So we have to be good 1 in 7.5 times. It's not hard to be good that often. I do expect to be shown an overpair here a lot. But again, overpairs probably should just bet bigger on the flop. So if our opponent does show us an overpair, then they end up losing value. So I guess that's fine. But I'm not folding. The only time you can really fold here, like I said, is when you're just very, very sure your opponent's never bluffing. And if you do know your opponent's never bluffing and would also not bet pocket 8s or pocket 6s or a7 in this manner, then this call becomes... a fold becomes fine. But I just can't know that, right? It's important to know what you don't know. So many students come to me saying something like, yeah, I just know he would not bet this way, so I folded in this spot. And in reality, they're good 1 in 6 times. You know, they're good way more than 1 in 7.5, right? They think they're good like 1 in 20, but really they're good 1 in 6 or 1 in 5. And the thing is that you don't get to see when you're good all that often. But calling still makes money even though you're going to be wrong or losing a lot of the time. So I do call. Then the opponent shows up with one of the hands I did not want to see, 10-9 suited, because if our opponent's value betting this on all 3 streets, then I'm maybe getting owned here. I would ideally like to know that my opponent's not value betting thinly, because as your opponent bets thinner and thinner up until the hands that are just slightly better than mine, then if they're not bluffing all that often, they actually do have a lot of value hands. But if they're literally only betting like pocket 10s and better, it's actually not that many combinations of hands, right? It's only 30 combinations of hands. If you compare that to all the ace kings, ace queens, ace jacks, king queens, king jacks, queen jacks, there are a whole lot of those, right? So, not that the opponent would necessarily bluff with all the bluffs, but at least those are potential bluffs you can consider. But if your opponent starts value betting ace 9 suited, maybe ace 9 offsuit for all I know, king 9 suited, queen 9 suited, jack 9 suited, maybe jack 9 offsuit, maybe 10 9 offsuit, who knows? Because again, our assumption our opponent is tight could just straight up be wrong. But as your opponent bets more and more 9s, then our call becomes worse and worse. This time he did have us though. You're not always going to win. I think a lot of people also get very frustrated whenever they just don't win hands where they feel like they probably should win or they think their decision is close. But you have to realize on this river, like our decision to call or fold is almost certainly either slightly bad or like a slightly bad to call, or it's really good to call. Because if our opponent doesn't show up a queen jack offsuit here ever, then we just know we're printing equity. So don't get discouraged whenever you do lose these hands. It is going to happen. And you're not always going to win. So that's going to be it for today. Hope you enjoyed this video for PokerNews.com. If you want to learn more from me, go sign up to my completely free trial over at PokerCoaching.com. No credit card is required. We have tons of quizzes very similar to this video, and also in-depth homework challenges where I would essentially ask you, how do you play your whole range in this scenario? And with 9-8 on the river, facing that tiny bet, I know we lost this time, but you just can't fold. So we do call, we do lose, and we move on with our lives knowing that we made a good play unless our opponent is indeed a super nit, but again, we can't know that. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Good luck in your games, and I will talk to you next time.